This is the fourth installment in a series of videos documenting the build of an entire Batfleck suit from Ben Affleck's canceled Batman movie. In this portion of the build, I'll be using 3D printed PLA, resin, and TPU to complete the chest and back pieces. Let's go. What's up, you guys? My name is Mark and welcome to my channel. All the files for this build can be purchased on the DO3D website, and I'll have a link in the description below. The suit was inspired by concept art by Keith Christensen, and if you haven't seen the previous 3 videos on this Batsuit, you can do so by clicking on the link in the corner of the screen. Here are all the files I'm going to be working on today loaded into Meshmixer. There are a total of 8 different pieces that make up this portion of the build. They will all be printed in different materials including PLA, TPU, and resin. The 4 straps pictured on the screen will be printed in TPU to provide flexibility. The 2 larger straps will be ordered from PCBWay using their 3D printing services, and the other 2 smaller pieces will be printed at home on my Ender 3S1. You guys will be able to see a huge difference in the TPU consistency and quality when ordering the parts instead of printing them at home. The 2 small buckles will be printed on my Haygears resin printer due to their size and increased detail. The chest and back plate will both be printed on my Ender 3S1 in PLA material. To begin, the chest plate is loaded into Cura, and right away you can see it's way too big to be printed in one piece. So I hop back into Meshmixer and separate the parts into 2 smaller pieces by splitting the chest right down the middle. Once split, each section is saved and loaded separately into Cura. All the parts are printed at 95% of their original file size at 0.2mm layer height using tree supports to save on filament. This exact process is then repeated on the back piece. After printing, the parts are removed from the build plate and briefly examined to make sure there are no failures. While going through the process of printing at home, the 2 shoulder straps are uploaded to PCBWay and ordered in TPU material. It's significantly more expensive to get parts printed in TPU, but once you see the results, you'll understand why. The parts came well packaged in about 5 business days after placing my order. As you can see, the pieces are extremely smooth, have an overall matte surface finish, which is exactly what I'm looking for, and literally 0 layer lines can be seen. I'm not exactly sure what kind of TPU PCBWay uses, but I'm pretty sure the parts are printed using selective laser sintering. If I handed this piece to someone, it would be very difficult for them to determine that it was 3D printed. To provide you guys some perspective, here's one of the straps next to the smaller TPU piece I printed at home. Although the flexibility is similar, the layer lines are clearly visible on the smaller piece, and it's obvious that it was 3D printed. You can always use Plastidip or some other type of flexible paint to cover up your TPU pieces, but when I've done this in the past, the coating always ends up cracking or crazing over time. I just prefer using PCBWay because I don't have to do any post-processing on the parts, and they're ready to be installed right when I get them. After all the PLA parts are printed, there are some pretty significant layer lines. Quite a bit of sanding and priming will need to be done to get the pieces as smooth as I want them. I ended up printing the buckles in PLA and resin to show the difference in layer lines. Although the PLA pieces were printed at 0.12mm layer height, the layer lines are still very prominent. Comparing this to the resin parts that were printed at 0.05mm, very little sanding will have to be done to get these to the quality that I'm looking for. Before connecting the back and chest together, each of the pieces are sanded with 120 grit sandpaper. It's easier to orient the sandpaper to get into the small crevices and details before combining the sections together. After sanding, a very small amount of superglue is used to tack the parts together before using a soldering iron and spare PLA filament to permanently attach the pieces. I use an old soldering iron for this, separate from the one I use for actual soldering, because it can slowly corrode the tip depending on what kind of material you choose to melt. Although melting PLA is not as toxic as other materials such as ABS, it's always good to wear a respirator and do this in a well-ventilated part of your house or shop. Not to mention, you might also end up melting a bit of the superglue when soldering the PLA, which is extremely toxic. All of this to say, please prioritize your safety first when doing projects. Once soldering is complete, the next step is to further smooth the back and chest pieces using epoxy or another type of 3D coating. I'll be using XTC 3D brush-on coating today for this build. The coating is made up of 2 compounds, A and B, very similar to epoxy, and should be mixed on a flat surface such as a sheet of aluminum foil to prolong the working time and prevent solidification. This brush-on coating is a bit pricey, so if you don't want to pay extra, you can use generic surface epoxy because it works just as well. I made a video on the differences between the 2 products a while back, so if you're interested in checking that out, you can click the link in the corner of the screen. This product is self-leveling, so I found over time that there isn't a need to add super thick coats. After adding a thin layer, you can always add more if needed. About 10 minutes after applying, a toothpick is used to trace along the lines and crevices to remove any built-up coating. I wait a full 24 hours to allow for proper curing before handling the pieces. While the coated parts are drying, the resin printed buckles are lightly sanded with 600 grit sandpaper. After being sanded, they are sprayed with Rust-Oleum's primer and set aside. Next is my favorite part of every build, which is sanding the PLA pieces. That was sarcastic. I f***ing hate sanding. However, to make things as easy and fast as possible, I'm using an oscillating tool with a triangular attachment for sanding pads. You can also use a disc sander instead, but the triangle-shaped pads allow for a bit more control and precision. The back and chest plates are sanded with 100 grit followed by 180 grit sandpaper. If you don't have a mechanical sander, you can always do it the good old-fashioned way, by hand. Although, if you do, don't come complaining to me because it will take forever. Once sanding using the oscillating tool is completed, the parts should look something like this. The parts are covered in 2 layers of Rust-Oleum's primer, but after drying there are still more visible layer lines than what I'm comfortable with, so I'll take care of them by using Dolphin 1K putty. You can also use Bondo, but I found that the Dolphin 1K putty sticks better and sands easier. The putty is placed on all the remaining layer imperfections that can be seen after the initial priming, which to be honest is quite a lot. After waiting 20 to 30 minutes for the putty to dry, 220 grit sandpaper is used to even out the surface. In hindsight, I should have wet sanded these parts because the dust from the cured putty got everywhere. It's okay if there are still a few minor imperfections after sanding because this will be taken care of in the next step. The pieces are covered in 2 more layers of Rust-Oleum's primer before wet sanding, starting with 320 grit sandpaper. As I've mentioned in pretty much every other video, the reason to incorporate water when moving to a higher grit is to prevent clogging and extend the life of the paper. Once sanded with 320, each part is wet sanded again with 600 grit. From there, it's pretty much just a process of repeatedly priming and sanding. After being sanded with 600, the parts are primed again and wet sanded with 1000 all the way up to 2000 grit. If needed, the parts can be primed and sanded even more depending on what you want the quality of your finish to look like. Going up to 2000 grit is usually sufficient for me, so that's where I'll end this portion of the video. After sanding for what feels like forever, I'm going to add some textured paint. As seen in the concept art, it appears 2 sections of the chest plate under the bat symbol have a textured surface. Frog tape is used to mask off portions of the chest plate that need to remain smooth. I highly recommend the delicate surface frog tape over regular painter's tape because in the past when I've used blue painter's tape, it has left residue on my parts and I've had to go through the entire sanding process again to remove it. 2 layers of Rust-Oleum's textured spray paint are applied, waiting about 5 minutes between coats. The color is irrelevant because the entire part will eventually be painted black. Once dry, the frog tape is carefully removed. It sometimes helps to run an X-Acto knife along the tape seams to ensure the tape doesn't grab or tear into the paint. If there is a bit of residue left by the tape, some fine grit sandpaper and water can be used to remove it. After that, all the pieces including the shoulder strap buckles are painted with Rust-Oleum's matte black. To ensure the bat symbol on the chest plate stands out, I want to paint it a different shade of black. I decided I'm going to use this metallic black, which is very similar to the paint I used on my Arkham Knight suit. I use frog tape again to isolate the sections that need to be painted. My plan is to put a matte clear coat over the whole chest plate, which I'm hoping will give the glossy metallic paint a unique look, differentiating it from the rest of the suit. After removing the tape and spraying all the parts with a few layers of matte clear coat, this is the result and I'm really happy with it. Before the TPU shoulder straps are attached to connect the back and chest plates, some metallic silver acrylic paint is used to apply some fine details. A small brush with sparing amounts of paint is run along the edges of the pieces and a few more prominent details are added to simulate extra weathering. I also use a paint pen to add some gold and chrome accents to the buckles and screws as seen in the concept art. To dull the appearance of the gold and chrome colors, I lightly brush over them with the metallic silver paint. If the look of weathered parts isn't your thing, you can skip this step and move right to the assembly. The 2 small TPU pieces I printed at home are wiggled into the opening in the center of the backplate. Some contact adhesive can be used to secure them in place if needed. The circular tube at the end of each TPU shoulder strap needs to be cut to allow them to slip onto the buckle at the top of the backplate. Once the straps are on, a soldering iron is used to seal the TPU back up. This provides a really secure connection that won't come apart easily. The buckles are slid an appropriate distance up the TPU straps. Contact cement is applied to the inside of the chest plate before inserting the straps into place. Some extra adhesive is added around the connections and the buckles are slid down towards the chest plate. I think it goes without saying, but as you go about the process of connecting all the pieces together, always be testing the assembly to ensure it actually fits your body. If it's too large, the straps can be cut shorter. If it's too small, vinyl straps can be added to the end of the TPU to extend them. It's worth checking the fitment before permanently connecting all the pieces together just to find out the suit doesn't fit. I'm happy with how this portion of the Batfleck build turned out, and I think it looks good with the rest of the suit so far. Let me know what you think in the comments below. The next part of the suit I'll be working on are the gauntlets and elbow pads, so if you don't want to miss that video, please make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date on the build. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out tremendously. I'll see you next time, and stay classy.